or have another print disability which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Harriet Gromer Hicks, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the May 3rd issue of the New York Times business section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Our first article is Japanese bathhouses feel the shock of war in Iran. In Tokyo, Yoshiko Kadima's family has run a traditional public bathhouse in the mountain city of Nagano, Japan for 138 years. The business has survived multiple world wars, 5 emperors, and 3 catastrophic earthquakes. But the conflict in Iran is threatening to put her Sento, as the storied Japanese institutions are called, out of business. Heating the water that pours out of Miss Kodama's faucets requires as much as 2,000 liters of heavy oil each month, and the soaring prices resulting from the war have left Miss Kodama, 87, unsure how she can continue operating a business she was already struggling to keep afloat. It is one of the many and growing ripple effects of the decisions made in Washington, Tel Aviv, and Tehran that are reverberating across the globe. If oil prices continue to go up, I'll really have to quit, Miss Kodama said. For nearly a millennium, Sento have served as social anchor in Japanese life. In these neighborhood facilities, often marked by signature indigo curtains adorned with Japanese character U, meaning hot water, residents pay a few dollars to scrub down and soak in shared tubs. But the industry has dwindled in recent decades, thinned by a chronic shortage of successors, an increase in private baths in new homes, and competition for modern amenity-filled spas. Now rising fuel costs threaten to push the few remaining operations to the brink. Our first article is Japanese bathhouses feel the shock of war in Iran. Tokyo, Yoshiko Kadima's family has run a traditional public bathhouse in the mountainous city of Nagano, Japan for 138 years. The business has survived multiple world wars, 5 emperors, and 3 catastrophic earthquakes. But the conflict in Iran is threatening to put her Sento, as the storied Japanese institutions are called, out of business. Heating the water that pours out of Miss Kodama's faucets requires as much as 2,000 liters of heavy oil each month, and the soaring prices resulting from the war have left Miss Kodama, 87, unsure of how she can continue operating a business she has already struggled to keep afloat. It is one of the many and growing ripple effects of decisions made in Washington, Tel Aviv, and Tehran that are reverberating across the globe. If oil prices continue to go up, I'll really have to quit, Ms. Kodama said. For nearly a millennium, Sento have served as social anchor in Japanese life. In these neighborhood facilities, often marked by signature indigo curtains adorned with the Japanese character U, meaning hot water, residents pay a few dollars to scrub down and soak in shared tubs. But the industry has dwindled in recent decades, thinned by a chronic shortage of successors, an increase in private baths in new homes, and competition for modern amenity-filled spas. Now rising fuel costs threaten to push the few remaining operations to the brink. Miss Kodama has run her family's bathhouse, Umanu, for more than 6 decades. Every day at 1 p.m., she shuffles down a narrow paved alleyway to the boiler room to light the furnace. By 2 p.m., she is at the taps filling the communal tubs. By 3 p.m., when the water has cooled to just over 104 degrees, her customers begin to arrive. Miss Kodama said she had never faced such a strain. It's worse than the oil shock, she said, referring to the 1973 energy crisis when an Arab-led oil embargo sent prices skyrocketing and changed how much of the world consumed energy. In the mid-20th century, most centers switched from firewood to gas and oil boilers. In Tokyo, bathhouses tend to use more city gas, but for regional Sento, oil is the standard. Since the war began 9 weeks ago, oil prices have surged, driving up bathhouse owners' costs by as much as 50%, according to the Japan National Sento Association. Operators face unique limitations in passing on higher costs to their customers. Historically, these bathhouses were designed as essential infrastructure for people without private baths. Because of this legacy, Sento are still classified as public welfare services, with prefectural governments capping entry fees at roughly 500 yen or about $3. Some operators charge below the cap, wary of undermining the Sento's more recent role as a social lifeline for Japan's isolated seniors. For this aging demographic, now the industry's primary clientele, bathhouse is as much a place to congregate and socialize as a place to bathe. Even before the war, Miss Kodama was not making a profit, but she kept the bathhouse open out of a sense of duty. She welcomes around a dozen customers a day, most in their 80s. Many live alone, and the communal soak provides their only social interaction of the day, she said. One regular is a 92-year-old retired teacher who walks 20 minutes to the Sento most days and likes to debate politics. To keep pace, Miss Kodama said she watches the news daily to keep her conversation topics afresh. Now ascendant fuel prices have turned that commitment into an impossible equation. I'm a bit of a fool for staying open, Miss Kodama said. I feel sorry for my customers. We have people pushing walkers to get here, but I'm paying for this place out of my own pension, she said. I'm fine with doing this as volunteer work, but I can't keep doing volunteer work I'm losing money on. Across Japan, cases like Miss Kodama's are multiplying, with a rash of temporary closures or slashed operating hours among the bathhouses in recent weeks. Shinchu Uno, executive director of Japan National Sento Association, estimates that as much as 1/5 of the nation's operators have taken such measures since the war began. Even before the latest energy disruptions, Sento were fading from Japanese neighborhoods. The number of bathhouses belonging to the industry association plummeted to 1,493 this year, a small fraction of the 18,000 that operated during the industry's peak in the 1960s. For decades, the facilities have been disappearing at a rate of about 4 to 5% annually. The fear is that the surge in inflation will hasten to the decline. Older owners who had planned to keep working for 5 or 10 more years may simply lose heart, Mr. Ono said. Their motivation is being sapped. I'm very worried that more people will just decide to close their doors early and go out of business. For an operation like Miss Kodama's, a decision to shutter would most likely mean the end of the family legacy. None of her 3 children are willing to take over the business after she retires, she said. What comes next for the industry is unclear. As of late March, more than 60% of Cento operators reported a drop-off in business, according to a survey released by the data provider Tico Databank. Beyond the higher cost of fuel, which typically makes up 30% to 50% of Cento operators' costs, we are seeing situations where fuel simply cannot be procured at all, said Diasek Ejima, a Tokyo Databank analyst. The most concerning thing for owners, he said, is the fact that this energy crisis is looking like it won't be temporary. Advocates are calling for emergency subsidies, while some government officials argue that public funds should not be used to support businesses already in irreparable decline. Ms. Kadima and other operators have lobbied to raise price caps, but many of her peers resist, fearing that their clientele, already squeezed by pensions that have not kept pace with inflation, would simply stop coming. Last month, the National Cento Association asked the government for help securing oil supplies and grants to struggling bathhouses. It also urged officials to give bathhouses more flexibility to raise prices as their energy costs climb. For Sam Holden, an American urban studies researcher in Tokyo, the Cento value cannot be measured solely by economics. In 2020, he co-founded Cento a Neighborhood, a nonprofit dedicated to revitalizing and preserving these facilities. During their heyday in the 1960s, Cento functions as central nodes within neighborhoods and local economics. Mr. Holden said, much like public parks in American cities or the Piazza in Italy, the bathhouses acted as anchors for social activity and local commerce, with barbershops and grocers springing around them. There are a lot of people who've been living in the neighborhood their whole lives, and a bathhouse is a place where they go and still communicate on a daily basis, Mr. Holden said. In a society getting more and more lonely, there's still a very good reason to support them, to try to preserve them. Our next article, 56 billion. The amount of revenue expected to be generated by AI-related ad sales this year. Artificial intelligence has infiltrated the digital advertising industry. AI-related digital ad sales hit 1 billion in 2022, rose to about 35 billion last year, and are expected to reach 56 billion this year, according to Madison & Wall, a consulting firm that tracks the industry. Marketers are automating their efforts using AI to create ads, measure results, and target audiences on tech platforms. This has been to the benefit of Google and Meta, the digital ad industry's leaders. Google said on Wednesday that its quarterly advertising revenue has jumped 16% from a year earlier to $77 billion, and Meta, its revenue had risen 33% to $56.3 billion. Google and Meta were already winning, and now with these AI tools, they're now lapping the field. Luke Stillman, a Madison Wall managing director, told the New York Times, Trip Mackel, and Eli Tan. The boom echoes the growth these companies experienced during the pandemic. Marketers have used AI in various stages of the advertising process, and brands may now have less control over how ads look and where they run. But perhaps the most significant change is the way that AI helps companies big and small target customers even more precisely. Extremely specific ads may alarm shoppers, but for the companies which are paid only if someone clicks on an ad, the increased relevance should prove lucrative. The Gemini tool has helped Google serve the most relevant ad in every search. Dan Taylor, the company's vice president for global ads, told the Times. Irrelevant ads have declined 40%. Despite some open questions, the industry is embracing the technology. The process is more opaque, but more money is going into it because advertisers and users see benefits outweighing drawbacks, Mr. Stillman says. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times business section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Our next article, Towns Want a Tsunami Shelter Before Danger Arrives. On the West Coast, many places can't afford to build needed life-saving structures. After a magnitude 8.8 earthquake struck off the eastern coast of Russia last July, phones around the world pinged with tsunami warnings. On the remote Alaskan island of Kodiak, Carrie Ivory, and other resident of native village of Ozanki, anxious watched the sea from a hill above the town. The threat of a tsunami there looms large. Ozanki was devastated by a massive earthquake in 1964, and residents received several tsunami warnings throughout the year. But on that day in July, the tension was unusually high. As a tribal administrator, Miss Ivory had been working for 5 years to secure a tsunami evacuation tower for her town of 167 residents. But it wasn't complete. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, which was substantially funded the project, had approved a tower's design in 2024, and the building materials ready to be assembled were stacked on a dock in the harbor below as the warnings rolled in. The vision flashed before my eyes of the headlines reading, Ozanki Tsunami Shelter Lost to Tsunami, Miss Ivory said. Luckily, the waves missed the town today. Miss Ivory can see the nearly completed tower from her office window. The fact that it's there at all feels miraculous, she said. Ozanki's tower is a rarity in the United States. Despite the risks of tsunami up and down much of the West Coast, only a handful of towns have such shelters. A tsunami is a high-risk but low-probability event, and these structures often come with multi-million-dollar price tags. There are so many issues that need to be solved now, so people can look at tsunamis as something exotic, said Elena Troshana, a tsunami modeler in the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Funding has been erratic. Last year, the Trump administration ended FEMA's Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities Program, or BRIC, which helps states invest billions of dollars in disaster readiness projects. A program that provided technical expertise to communities seeking to secure BRIC grants was cut out. Then in March, following an order from a federal judge, FEMA announced the BRIC had been reinstated, pledged $1 billion in grants. A FEMA representative declined to comment on the timeline of funds getting to communities. The confusion around BRIC has frustrated towns with projects on hold. Folks in communities that have already applied for these grants are waiting very anxiously, said Dante Sabastino, who helps communities in Washington state plan for tsunamis and apply for funding. Designed to withstand strong earthquakes, the tsunami shelters, called vertical evacuation structures, are designed to withstand hours or even days of submersion and debris-filled seawater. They're rugged buildings made of concrete and steel anchored 50 feet or more into soft coastal ground. Some of them, like the one in Uzinki, have stand-alone towers used only in an emergency. Other functions most of the time as hospitals, gyms, or university buildings and become evacuated sites when a tsunami approaches. The shelters are essential for low-lying coastal communities that don't have high ground to escape to if a tsunami is coming, said Maximilian Dixon, an earthquake program manager for the Washington State Military Department Emergency Management Division. That includes most of the Pacific Northwest and Hawaii, which are especially vulnerable to tsunamis because many earthquakes strike along the edges of the Pacific Ocean where the tectonic plates meet. The first tsunami shelter in the United States, a school gymnasium in Westport, Washington, was completed in 2016. The first standalone tsunami tower was built in 2022 by the Shoalwater Bay Indian Tribe in Tokeland, Washington. Ocean Shores, Washington, about 10 miles north of Tokeland, have been trying to minimize the risk of tsunami for nearly a decade. On a sandbar protecting into Pacific Ocean, the community of about 8,000 is one of the worst vulnerable along the coast. If the big one hits, we're pretty much entirely underwater, said Scott Anderson, the city administrator. State officials estimate that Ocean Shores would need 23 evacuation towers to fully protect its population from a major tsunami. But we can't even get one built, Mr. Anderson said. Planning began in 2018. The city received its first FEMA grant for tsunami mitigation. At the time, the cost estimate was around $5 million. The latest estimate from a year ago was up $12 million. The town's share would be 12.5%, not a small number, Mr. Anderson said. It's probably 50-50 on whether the public wants us to build the towers, various those who won't, said Frank Elderman, the mayor of Ocean Shores. The price isn't the only problem. Some residents worry the structure wouldn't survive a major tsunami or that they wouldn't get there in time. One vocal opponent of the tower proposed relying on hot air balloons to escape, Mr. Elderman said. In a town with a lot of retirees, there's a prevailing sense of if it happens, Mr. Anderson said. But of course, everyone will say that until millisecond it happens. With the grant up in the air, work is moving forward on another project in the town thanks to funding from state legislature, a tsunami-safe gymnasium in the elementary school. Construction is set to begin this spring, and a high school scheduled to be built in a few years has a tsunami-safe structure in its design. It's great to see some of these projects moving forward, said Randy Newman, who leads the school facilities program at the Office of Superintendent of Public Infrastructure in Washington, D.C. The city of Seaside, Oregon, is especially vulnerable to tsunamis because its unusual geography. 2 rivers crossed by 11 bridges encircle the downtown area. In the event of a tsunami, residents would have to cross the bridges to escape to high ground a mile away. But few bridges could withstand the preceding earthquake, leaving people stranded. According to a 2024 analysis by the state, only about a quarter of the seaside's population would survive if a major tsunami were to occur. Seaside is one of the best examples of where vertical evacuation structures should be considered, says Jonathan Allen, a coastal geomorphologist who leads the tsunami program for the state of Oregon. With limited space downtown, where the most effective spots for evacuation towers would be, the town is considering a multi-purpose tsunami-proof structure like a parking facility topped by an urban park, but the cost that could be several times higher than that of a standalone evacuation tower. We're a city of 7,200, so there's no way we can afford to build that structure on our own, said Spencer Kyle, city manager for Seaside. Mr. Kyle foresees funding hurdles, especially given FEMA's uncertain status, but he and the town are committed to keeping residents safe if the worst could happen. For Mr. Avery, those tower Ozenki is nearing completion. It comes down to a community sense of self-preservation. Nobody's coming to rescue us, she said. We have to rescue ourselves. Our next article, What You Get for $375,000. In Louisville, Kentucky, what a 1910 brick bungalow on a 0.1 of an acre. Now, how much? $365,000. Size, 1,889 feet. Price per square foot is $199. Centering this 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house and backyard guest house are across the street from Shelby Park, home to a picnic area and basketball tennis courts. A brewery, a vegan restaurant, and a pub are all within walking distance. The campus of the University of Louisville is 10 minutes away by car. Indoors, this home's covered front porch is elevated above the street, with the space of a pair of chairs to face Shelby Park. Original details in the living room include hardwood floors and a brick fireplace surrounded. The layout has an easy flow with a spacious dining room behind the living room. The eat-in kitchen has been updated with white subway tile along the walls and stainless steel appliances. 2 bedrooms are off the living room, as is a full bathroom. The second floor is used as a primary suite and includes a sleeping alcove behind an exposed brick chimney. Outdoor space. Across a paved patio behind the house is a studio guest house with its own bathroom and full kitchen. The driveway has 2 parking spots. Taxes are $2,604, which is estimated. Contact Sam Henn Family Real Estate. In Indianapolis, what a mid-century modern house built in 1960 on a 1 acre. How much? $375,000. Size, 2,280 square feet. Price per square foot, $164. Setting, the 4-bedroom, 2.5-bathroom house has designed by a local architect as his personal residence, and updates by the current owners have focused on restoring its original character. The neighborhood is quiet with public Catholic schools within a 5-minute drive. Fort Harrison State Park is 10 minutes away by car, and downtown Indianapolis is 15 minutes away. Indoors, the main living spaces are on the home's level, with an opening living room, dining room, and kitchen, all lined with walls of glass that face the backyard. Countertops in the kitchen are a mint green and white enamel. Electric range dates to the 1960s. A bedroom with a built-in bunk beds and a powder room are also on this level. The primary bedroom has its own wall of glass and can fit a king-size bed, with two bedrooms at the other end of the hall can fit queen-size beds. Outdoor space. A wood deck looks out over the backyard, and a lower level patio has access to the kitchen and living room. A two-car garage is attached at the street level. Taxes are estimated to be $3,984. Contact Christy Calvert, Berkshire Hathaway Home. In Little Rock, Arkansas, what a one-story cottage built in 1900 on a .2 an acre, which how much is $375,000. Price per square foot is $169. Setting, this 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house is in Little Rock's Governor's Mansion District, 5 minutes by car from the William J. Clinton Library and Museum, a barbecue restaurant, and a small park within walking distance. The campus of Little Rock University, Arkansas, at Little Rock is less than 10 minutes away by car. Indoors, the home's covered front porch is big enough to work as an outdoor sitting room with columns atop red brick pillars and a wood railing. Hardwood floors inside the original and formal living and dining rooms are in the opposite sides of the foyer. Behind the living room are a more casual sitting room and a breakfast nook. The kitchen has wood countertops and a garden window above the sink. All 3 bedrooms are linked by a main hall, with a primary bedroom at the far end. 2 large windows fill the room with natural light, and the ensuite bathroom has a walk-in shower. The other 2 bedrooms share a full bathroom. Outdoor space, the home has a fenced backyard with space for a patio. Taxes are an estimated $2,460. Contact Don Scott, Janet Jones Company. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times business section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Our next article is in real estate. They're willing to get their hands dirty. With the bleak job market and fears of AI, young workers line up for jobs in the trades. On a recent evening in Queens, Eddie Olivias realized he needed to change his plans. He was scouting out the office of the Insulators Union, where he and 2 friends planned to pick up applications the next morning for an apprenticeship, a year-long program that provides mentorship and hands-on construction training. 15 hours before 8 a.m. call time, a line was already forming. Mr. Alvarez, 25, said he called his friends, co-workers at T-Mobile store in Queens and told them to come to the building. By 5:30 p.m., they were in line with a tent, a smart decision since by morning it was drizzling. In recent weeks, lines like these, often filled with young people who are eager for careers in construction, have been snacking around union offices. Citing poor job prospects, the costs of college, and fears that artificial intelligence may soon take over their jobs, dozens of hopeful and current apprentices said that a job in the trade seemed like the best route for their futures. That's one of the things that's more attractive to me to do this, because it's some kind of job that is for the moment. AI can't do. John Polaris, 29, said of construction work, while in line, Mr. Alvarez, he was concerned that their sales jobs at T-Mobile would become obsolete within a few years. About an hour after the application distribution began, a coordinator signaled to those still in line that they should head home. The union was about already out of its 100 applications for about 15 spots. Last year, there were available applications for days, according to one coordinator. Mr. Alvarez and his friends, the night camping in line paid off. They secured applications and began preliminary assessments last month. The surge in interest appears to be happening nationwide, according to a director with the North America's Building Trades Unions. In New York, the local iron workers union has had a 20% increase in number of applicants over the past 2 years, according to the Building and Construction Trades Council of Greater New York, an organization of union affiliates. Finishing trades had 50% increase from 2023 to 2024. Interest is noticeably trending among younger generation, spreading through social media in addition to the word-of-mouth pipeline that traditionally led workers to unions. Many people in line in recent weeks learned about the opportunities through accounts like Workers Club New York City, which broadcasts when apprenticeship applications will be distributed. 5 years ago, applicants for some trades were commonly in their 30s, according to a spokeswoman for the broader Trades Council. Now they're in their 20s, with a noticeable group coming right out of high school. What happened? Why are all these people really interested in joining this union? Said James Hayes, the director of Carpenters Training Center in New York City, which holds monthly information sessions for potential trainees. Many of the young people interested in construction programs said they wanted to apply because of the current job market, which nationally is the bleakest it's been in years for young graduates, as hiring has slowed and entry-level jobs are harder to come by. In New York City, according to the Center for Urban Future, the number of entry-level postings fell 37% from 2022 to 2024. Young New Yorkers are having an increasingly difficult time entering the workforce, said Mark Levine, the city's comptroller, a trend that should be raising alarm bells for anyone watching our economy. Michael Figueroa, an 18-year-old who got an application for the insulator's apprenticeship after waiting for in line overnight, said he had struggled to find work. Most of the jobs have applied to have been retail jobs, but most of them I can't get, he said. I feel comfortable with my resume, but it just hasn't worked out. Adding to the distress of many young people feel is AI's encroachment into a variety of fields. A recent poll by Harvard University found that a majority of young Americans believe AI threatens their professional prospects. Though economists are uncertain how it will disrupt the market, a report from Stanford University found substantial declines in employment among young workers in jobs that are most exposed to AI, like computer programming and customer service. Manual fields like construction and maintenance, however, aren't as vulnerable, according to several economic studies. The pay is also attractive to many young workers. Union apprentices earn a competitive hourly rate and benefits. Potential salaries for some program graduates can start at around $100,000, according to various union leaders. I need something that I know is not going to have like a robot taking over in a few years, said Michaela Oterio, 20, who is in a masonry training program. She described herself as a visual learner and said she grew up watching her grandfather and uncle work in construction. If something's messed up, I know what's wrong with that, she said, and I can fix it myself. For those who land a union apprenticeship, their careers begin with years-long training. At a recent session at the Finishing Trades Institute of New York and Queens, a sprawling center with classrooms and a warehouse, first-year apprentices learned how to delicately paste wallpaper for a fake hotel room. Later that day, other students secured themselves to Mock Bridge to practice suspending above waterways. As one commercial painting apprentice, Tashi Shields, 24, slowly smoothed plaster, she said the community college had overwhelmed her. When she secured an apprenticeship through a job readiness program, Miss Shields, an artist, said she felt as if she found a career that would also help her creative ambitions. She noted that along with the health and pet insurance, a benefit of the job was meeting her boyfriend a third-year apprenticeship. But she's had to get used to the physical demands. It's a very straining job, said Miss Shields, who said she sometimes complained about it to her friends. For parents, it may be difficult to watch their children turn to such a physically demanding career, said Melissa Shetler, an education associate at Cornell's School of Industrial and Labor Relations. You work to get your kid to go to college, of win the great American dream, and there was the upward mobility promise with that, Miss Shelter said. But I think this generation, they're sort of seeing that not necessarily what it is, and they're finding a lot of pride and solidarity in this different type of work. One instructor at the Finishing Trades Institute of New York, Omar Robinson, who's been teaching for more than 2 decades, finds that this generation of apprentices needs a lot more reassurance. I grew up with the philosophy that if you're doing something and don't say anything, that means you're good, said Mr. Robinson, who tries to joke with students while caulk is drying. Now he said, I got to tell them, good job, keep going like that. Union apprenticeships aren't the only skilled trade programs that have had an uptick in interest. The number of applications for the City's Youth Train and Earn program, which offers 6 training programs in the construction trades, increased by 30% over the last year. Nonprofits in the city like St. Nick's Alliance, which focuses on affordable housing and workforce development, also reported high demands of interest. For an electrical training class earlier this year, over 250 people showed up for a class with 18 spots, according to a director with the group. The reported surge in interest might be arriving at the right time. There is so much work coming, said Gary LaBerca, the president of the Trades Council, adding, I think people are recognizing there is going to be a numerous opportunity here. While it's unclear how many union construction jobs the Madani administration will secure, the Adams administration announced last year that $7 billion in projects will fall under union labor agreements. To supply the anticipated union labor, the city hopes for 30,000 additional apprenticeships to be created in 2030. Once apprentices complete their programs, they'll have more than just a secure job, instructors say. They'll also have a new way of seeing the city. That's one of the highlights of my conversation with these young people, is that if you succeed, you'll have a special pride in building the skylines of New York City, said Larry Hughes, an 82-year-old instructor who's been in the cement and concrete union for over 63 years. He said his daughter used to point out the buildings he's worked on when she went on dates. At a recent painting workshop, Jeffrey Estacoco, 26, was learning how to prime a wall as he described how he's already claiming pieces of the skyline. On a bike ride with friends, Mr. Aceteco pointed out a hotel he worked on. "You see that building right there?" he called, telling them, "That was me." You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times business section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Our next article is in Corner Office. The scientific method shapes a leader's work. Running a museum requires a wide variety of skills, including knowing how to raise money from potential donors and how to excite visitors. It helps to keep asking questions. The largest science museum in the Western Hemisphere is doing a lot of experiments these days to attract more visitors. The Griffin Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago has rotated its exhibitions more frequently, adjusted to schedule of free admission days, and acquired splashy new pieces like a SpaceX Dragon spacecraft, which it secured in 2022, its first major acquisition in 30 years. The museum is colossal, a Buick Smart-style palace built for the 1893 World's Fair, sprawls over more than 1,000,000 square feet and houses exhibitions that include an interactive coal mine that inspired Walt Disney to create Disneyland, a simulated 40-foot tornado, and the only German submarine in the United States. And the Rotundo digital screens flash the question, what is science? Chevry Humphrey, the chief executive, is trying to answer that question in a broad and urgent way. This month, the museum will open a new permanent exhibition exploring how energy shapes our daily lives, just as the war in Iran is prompting big questions about our relationship with oil, gas, and other sources of power. That is a traditional initiative for a science museum. Just a few places away, another exhibition is set to open on something less expected. Anne Frank, Dr. Humphrey sees it as an opportunity for the museum's youngest patrons to grapple with larger, frightening forces around them, as Franks did in her Dear Kitty journal during the Holocaust. Kids are just trying to make sense of the world and still have a childhood, Miss Humphrey said, noting all the things happened with the war, with the school shootings and other alarming events. Dr. Humphrey, 61, seems to embody the giddiness of elementary school students who bounce through the museum's halls, and describes her job as running a business where we're actually changing things to create excitement. Last year, 1.5 million people visited the museum, and foot traffic was up 12.4% compared with 2019. Revenue, which comes from the ticket sales, memberships, donations, and city government support, increased nearly 10% from 2020 to 2024. The official name of the museum changed from 2024 to acknowledge Kenneth C. Griffin, the chief executive of the hedge fund Citadel, who donated $123 million, one of the largest gifts the museum has ever received. In an emailed statement, Mr. Griffin said that Miss Humphrey had led the institution with clarity and purpose. This interview has been edited and condensed. How do you think about how to talk about science in the polarization, politicalized movement? Science helps you understand the world around you. A scientific process is about testing, experimenting, observing, finding the solution, and then iterating it. It starts all over again. We have to show you that the scientific process was. We try to show our audiences why and how this was developed, how this affects you and impacts your life. You're from Texas and previously worked in Arizona. What was it like coming to work on the south side of Chicago? Sometimes when you come in as a new person coming from another community, you have a different lens and a different perspective. You see things that others may not see. The blessing of not knowing means I can ask more questions. I'm using the same scientific process that we try to help kids and families learn to build a better museum for our community. You seem focused on museums being community gathering spots. How do you think of the utility of a museum? We're safe spaces to have conversations where people trust that we're not telling them what to do. We're helping them to think and providing them with the tools to critically think and problem solve on their own. No one's ever failed at a museum. This isn't a school. Tell me about this Anne Frank exhibit, which is coming from Amsterdam and will feature artifacts from Miss Frank's life. Why would a science museum feature it? Most of the people that are coming to our museum on the free field trips, and specifically in our community, will probably never get to go to Anne Frank's House of Amsterdam. If you think about it, our children are trying to make sense of the world around them because there are lots of stuff going on today. Anne's story is similar. She's writing to her dear Kitty, wondering what's happening in the world around her and why all these horrible things are happening. The executive director of Anne Frank House was skeptical about bringing it here at first. Then he stepped in our lobby. We have a lot of Annes running around our museum trying to make sense of the world around them. They're going to receive their own diary so they can write and reflect. How do you excite the donor base? The business side is no money, no mission. You have to run it like a business. But at the end of the day, you have a show donors how you're going to leverage their dollars to have a higher impact. I remember a call I did with someone from a private equity. They're really tough. He questioned me about the business for about 10 minutes. I was able to answer every question, he said. Okay, now let's talk about how I will invest. You have to make tough decisions. You have to assess. You have to analyze. You have to say no, just like a regular business does. How else do you work with donors? When I first got here, we hadn't collected a big artifact in over 30 years. So in my third month, I was on the phone with 2 board members. They said, "What can we do for you?" I had a mentor that said, when somebody asks you what you want, you need to be prepared with an answer. So I said, you were one of the first investors in SpaceX. I'd like to get a Dragon spacecraft. 2 weeks later, we got SpaceX Dragon spacecraft. You're from Houston. Tell me about your upbringing. I grew up in 3rd Ward in Houston. My parents bused me to school outside my neighborhood, and I felt guilty because all my friends in my neighborhood weren't getting all the education I was from those rich schools. So I'd hold school in my garage. I'm going to teach you what I learned at all these rich schools. I'd give them toy after they learned. I'd go back to my parents, get some more money, buy some more toys. What did your parents do? My father was a policeman and a U.S. Marshal, and my mother was a music teacher. My father was a first-generation college graduate. He wanted to go to medical school, but gave that up to send his baby sister and his niece to college. He always taught me we're put on earth to help people. My father allowed me to be the CEO and CFO of our household. I actually had to pay the bills. I had to write checks out. I had to keep the books. I always knew I wanted to be a manager or CEO of something. I wanted to be in charge. What's the best advice you received from your mom? At Arizona Science Center, I was the first black American to ever run a science museum in the United States. I was proud and excited. I went home and told my mom. My mom was like, "Take the trash out. What you going to do tomorrow?" She always told me that it's not where you are, it's what you do. Lightning around. What exhibit do you find yourself in the most? I gravitate toward the tornado and science storms because it helps me in my toes. What's the toughest science class you ever took? It was microbiology. It was a lot of memory. I went to my mother for help, and she taught me how to create songs out of each communicable disease so that I could pass the test. Greatest invention of all time, the wheel of internet. I would say the wheel. Would you rather walk on the moon or be the first person on Mars? First person on Mars. When you need to think, do you like a quiet office or a walking the museum floor? Walking the museum floor, hands down. I'll get to thinking, and some young kid will stop me and ask me a question because I always wear my name tag. They ask me questions, and that's when I learn more. What's the last thing you learned from your youngest employee? They taught me my cell phone how to do an emoji that really looked like me. A big part of your job is fundraising. What's your best piece of advice for it? No is always a maybe.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the USA Today. Following that at 2 o'clock, we have episode number 4 of Ira Gershwin by Michael Owen. Stay with us for these readings and more.
The following program is intended for listeners